Dean Martin stopped singing mid-word, the microphone inches from his lips, and 5,000 people in the Sands showroom went silent at once. Wait, because what made him stop wasn't the band, wasn't a technical glitch, and wasn't a joke. It was the gun sitting on the table 3 rows back, resting next to a glass of bourbon, owned by a man whose name you never said out loud in Las Vegas unless you were ready to disappear. The spotlight was still warm on Dean's face. The band kept playing for 3 more bars before the conductor noticed something was wrong and raised his hand. The music died. Dean lowered the microphone slowly, his eyes locked on the table, and the room held its breath. Write in the comments, where are you listening to this story from and what time is it right now? To understand what happened in that showroom, you need to go back 3 days earlier, June 15, 1965. Dean was in his dressing room at the Sands, flipping through a magazine, when there was a knock at the door. His assistant, Jackie, opened it. A man in an expensive suit stood in the hallway, and Jackie's face went pale the second he saw him. "Mr. Martin," the man said, not waiting for an invitation. "Mr. Antonelli would like to speak with you after your show tonight, in private." Dean looked up from his magazine. "Tell Mr. Antonelli I'm pretty tired after shows these days. Maybe another time." The man's expression didn't change. "Mr. Antonelli insists." Dean set down his magazine and stood up. He walked over to the door and looked the man directly in the eyes. "Tell Mr. Antonelli that Dean Martin doesn't take meetings with people who send messengers. If he wants to talk to me, he can come to my dressing room himself and ask nicely." The man stared at Dean for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I'll deliver your message." After he left, Jackie was shaking. "Dean, do you know who that was? That was Vincent Antonelli's guy. You can't just blow him off like that." Dean shrugged and went back to his magazine. "I can, and I did." But here's the part you really need to notice. Vincent Antonelli wasn't just connected to organized crime. He was one of the most feared enforcers in the Nevada crime family. In 1965, Las Vegas wasn't the family-friendly tourist destination it is today. It was a city owned and operated by the mob. The casinos, the hotels, the shows, everything ran through them and everyone knew it. The Sands Hotel, where Dean performed regularly, was partially owned by crime families. Frank Sinatra had his own complicated relationship with these men. The Rat Pack knew the rules. You performed, you entertained, you kept your mouth shut, and you never, ever crossed the men who really ran the town. Dean Martin understood this better than most. He'd grown up in Steubenville, Ohio, a town where organized crime was just part of the landscape. His father had worked in a barbershop that was a front for illegal gambling. Dean knew these men. He knew how they thought, and he knew what they were capable of. But Dean also had something most people didn't have, a complete lack of fear when it came to performing. On stage, Dean was untouchable. Not because he was arrogant, but because he genuinely didn't care about impressing anyone. He was there to sing, tell jokes, and have a good time. If you didn't like it, that was your problem. On June 16th, the night after Dean turned down the meeting, the same messenger appeared at his dressing room after the show. "Mr. Antonelli is waiting downstairs. He'd like to speak with you now." Dean was taking off his bow tie. "Tell Mr. Antonelli I already left for the night." "But Mr. Martin, you're right here." "Am I?" Dean said with a smile. "Could have sworn I left 10 minutes ago." The messenger's jaw tightened. "Mr. Martin, I don't think you understand." "No, pal, I understand perfectly," Dean interrupted. "I understand that I just worked my ass off for 2 hours entertaining people. I understand that I'm tired, and I understand that I'm going to my room to have a drink and go to sleep. Now you can stand there and argue with me, or you can deliver my message to your boss. Your choice." The messenger left without another word. Jackie was beside himself. "Dean, you're going to get yourself killed. You have to talk to Frank. He knows how to handle these guys." Dean shook his head. "Frank handles them his way. I handle them mine." Wait, because what happened next is what turned this from a simple refusal into something much more dangerous. The word got out. In a town where reputation was everything, Dean Martin had twice refused a direct request from Vincent Antonelli. That was unheard of. People started talking. Some said Dean was crazy, others said he was brave, a few said he was both. By June 17th, the third day, the tension backstage was thick enough to cut. The air in Dean's dressing room smelled like cigarette smoke and old leather. The mirror lights buzzed faintly, casting yellow shadows across the walls. Dean's manager tried to reason with him, pacing back and forth across the worn carpet. "Dean, just take the meeting. Sit down with the guy for 5 minutes. What's the harm?" Dean was adjusting his bow tie in the mirror, his movements calm and deliberate. "The harm," he said, his voice steady, "is that if I sit down with him because he threatened me, then I work for him. And I don't work for him, I work for me." "Dean, this isn't about pride." "It's exactly about pride," Dean interrupted, turning away from the mirror. "It's about walking onto that stage every night knowing I got there on my own terms. The second I let someone like Vincent Antonelli dictate what I do, I'm finished, not because he'll kill me, though he might, but because I won't be able to look at myself in the mirror anymore." His manager stopped pacing. "You're risking everything for a principle." "No," Dean said quietly. "I'm protecting everything because of a principle. Listen to what was happening beneath the surface here." Dean wasn't just refusing a meeting, he was drawing a line. In a town owned by the mob, where every other performer bent the knee, Dean Martin was saying no. Not with anger, not with bravado, but with quiet, unmovable certainty. And Vincent Antonelli heard him loud and clear. June the 18th, 1965. Dean's evening show. The Sands showroom was packed, as always. Cigarette smoke hung in the air like fog, the stage lights cutting through it in golden beams. The smell of perfume and whiskey mixed with the sound of ice clinking in glasses. The stage lights came up, the band started playing, and Dean walked out to thunderous applause. He opened with "Ain't That a Kick in the Head," moving through his set with his trademark ease. He told jokes between songs, sipped from his glass, apple juice as always, though the audience assumed it was scotch, and made it all look effortless. The room was electric. Women in evening gowns leaned forward in their seats. Men in tuxedos raised their glasses in silent toasts. The waitresses moved like shadows between the tables, balancing trays with practiced grace. Everything was perfect, everything was normal, until halfway through "That's Amore," when Dean saw him. Vincent Antonelli was sitting 3 rows back, center section. Expensive suit, slicked back hair. And on the table in front of him, resting next to a glass of bourbon, was a gun. Not hidden, not tucked away. Just sitting there where everyone near that table could see it, and where Dean could see it. Dean stopped singing. The band kept playing for a few more bars before the conductor noticed and cut the music. The room went silent. 5,000 people held their breath, sensing something was wrong, but not understanding what. Dean stood there, microphone in hand, staring at Vincent Antonelli. And Vincent stared back, his expression unreadable. Then Dean did something that no one in that room expected. He walked off the stage. Not away from Vincent, toward him. Each step echoed in the silence. Down the stage steps, his shoes hitting the polished floor with soft clicks that somehow filled the entire room. Through the narrow aisle between tables, past waitresses frozen in place with trays balanced on their hips, past audience members whose eyes went wide as they realized what was happening. The spotlight operator followed him instinctively, the beam of light trailing Dean like a ghost, illuminating his path through the darkness. Dean walked straight to Vincent Antonelli's table, and the entire showroom seemed to shrink to just the two of them. He stopped in front of the table. The gun was right there, inches away. Vincent didn't move, didn't speak, just watched Dean with cold, unblinking eyes. Dean reached down and picked up the microphone stand from the stage manager's station near the table. He adjusted it, set it in front of Vincent, and then handed him the microphone. "You wanted to talk," Dean said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "So talk. You got 5,000 people listening." The room didn't breathe. Vincent Antonelli looked at the microphone in Dean's hand. Then he looked at Dean. And for the first time in his life, Vincent Antonelli didn't know what to do. Because Dean had just called his bluff in the most public way possible. If Vincent wanted to threaten him, Fine, but he'd have to do it in front of everyone. If he wanted to talk, he could talk, but not in some back room where fear did the work for him. Right here. Right now, in the light. Vincent's jaw tightened. His hand moved toward the gun on the table, and the entire room flinched, but Vincent didn't pick it up. Instead, he pushed his chair back and stood up. He looked at Dean for a long moment, then glanced around the room at the thousands of eyes watching him. He'd been outmaneuvered, and he knew it. "Enjoy your show, Mr. Martin," Vincent said quietly. Then he turned and walked out of the showroom, leaving the gun on the table. Dean watched him go. Then he turned back to the audience, picked up the microphone and said, "Anybody else got something they want to say before I finish this song?" The room exploded in laughter and applause. The tension shattered like glass. Dean walked back onto the stage, nodded to the conductor, and picked up right where he'd left off. "When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's Amore." But notice what had really happened in that moment. Dean hadn't fought Vincent Antonelli. He hadn't threatened him. He hadn't even insulted him. He'd simply forced him to make a choice, escalate in front of everyone, or back down. And Vincent, for all his power and fear and reputation, had chosen to back down. After the show, Dean's dressing room was flooded with people. His manager, his assistant, other performers, even a couple of casino executives. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. "What the hell were you thinking?" Dean lit a cigarette and poured himself a real drink this time. "I was thinking," he said slowly, "that a man who pulls a gun in public is trying to scare you. And a man who's trying to scare you isn't planning to use it. If Vincent really wanted me dead, I'd already be dead. He wanted me afraid, and I wasn't going to give him that." "But what if you were wrong?" someone asked. Dean shrugged. "Then I'd be wrong. But at least I'd be wrong on my own terms." The story spread through Las Vegas like wildfire. Within hours, everyone in town knew what Dean Martin had done. Some called it the gutsiest move they'd ever seen. Others called it the stupidest. But everyone agreed on one thing. Dean Martin had just redefined what it meant to stand your ground. Vincent Antonelli never bothered Dean again. In fact, a week later, a bottle of expensive scotch showed up at Dean's dressing room with a note, "No hard feelings." It wasn't signed, but Dean knew who it was from. Years later, someone asked Dean if he'd been scared that night in the showroom. Dean thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "Scared? Sure. But being scared and being afraid are two different things. Scared is what your body does. Afraid is what your mind does. My body was screaming at me to run. But my mind knew that if I ran, I'd spend the rest of my career running. So I didn't." That night at the Sands became one of the most talked about moments in Las Vegas history. Not because of the violence, there was none, but because of what it represented. In a town built on fear and control, one man had walked up to power and refused to blink. And somehow, impossibly, he'd walked away. Dean Martin kept performing at the Sands for years after that. He kept singing, kept joking, kept making it all look easy. But everyone who was in that showroom on June 18, 1965, knew the truth. They'd seen the man behind the smile. They'd seen the steel beneath the charm. And they'd seen what it looked like when someone decided that their dignity was worth more than their safety. The gun stayed on Vincent Antonelli's table for 3 more minutes after he left before a casino security guard finally removed it. Some people said Vincent left it there on purpose, a final acknowledgement that Dean had won. Others said he just forgot it in his hurry to leave. Either way, it didn't matter. The message had been sent, and the message had been received. Dean Martin wasn't just a singer. He wasn't just a performer. He was a man who knew exactly who he was and exactly what he wouldn't compromise. And on that night, in front of 5,000 people, he'd proven it.